On New Year's Eve, the city shimmered beneath millions of sparkling lights. Every luxury hotel hosted glamorous celebrations, every famous restaurant had been fully booked for weeks, and laughter echoed through streets filled with families and couples counting down the final hours of the year. It seemed everyone had somewhere to belong. Everyone except Valeria Castillo. At 38 years old, Valeria was one of the country's most successful CEOs. She had built a technology company from a tiny rented office into a global empire worth billions. Newspapers praised her intelligence, business schools studied her leadership, and television hosts called her the woman who had everything. Yet when she left the towering glass headquarters that evening, she carried only one small handbag and an overwhelming feeling of loneliness. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from executives, investors, and employees. "Happy New Year, CEO." One message read. Another thanked her for an incredible year of profits. Dozens more wished her continued success. She appreciated every message, but none of them asked the one question she secretly longed to hear. "Are you spending tonight with someone?" She slipped her phone into her purse and whispered to herself, "Success fills calendars, but it doesn't always fill hearts." Instead of attending another extravagant corporate gala where everyone would praise her achievements, she decided to visit a small restaurant she had loved years earlier, long before becoming famous. It was a cozy family-owned place where people came for homemade food rather than expensive status. She remembered eating there as a young woman when she was struggling to build her first business. Back then she could barely afford the soup of the day, but she always left feeling rich because the owners treated everyone like family. When she arrived, the parking lot was overflowing. Through the windows she saw smiling faces, children wearing paper party hats, grandparents laughing together, and couples raising glasses in celebration. She stepped inside, hoping someone might have cancelled. The hostess greeted her warmly before checking the reservation list. "I'm so sorry," she said with genuine regret. "Every table is taken." "I don't have a reservation," Valeria admitted. The hostess searched again, hoping for a miracle. "I'm afraid the waiting list is already over 3 hours." Valeria nodded politely. "I understand." She thanked the hostess and walked back toward the entrance. Standing outside in the cold, she looked through the restaurant window. Every chair was occupied. Every table held conversations, laughter, and shared memories. For the first time in many years, the billionaire who could purchase almost anything realized she couldn't buy the one thing she wanted most that evening, a place where she belonged. Snowflakes drifted quietly around her as she wrapped her coat tighter. She considered returning to her empty penthouse where silence waited behind every expensive wall. Just then, someone called out, "Excuse me, miss." She turned toward the window. An older man wearing worn work boots, faded jeans, and a grease-stained mechanic's jacket stood from a small table in the corner. He smiled kindly and motioned toward the empty chair across from him. "You can have this seat if you'd like." Valeria blinked in surprise. "Oh, no, I couldn't possibly." The man chuckled. "Please, I ordered enough food for 2 by accident. I'd hate to see it go to waste." She hesitated. "I don't want to interrupt your evening." "You won't." His smile was so sincere that it erased every trace of embarrassment. "My name's Mateo." "I'm Valeria." They shook hands. His hands were rough, scarred by years of repairing engines. Hers were smooth from signing contracts and giving presentations. Their lives couldn't have been more different, yet somehow the handshake felt surprisingly familiar. She sat down. The waiter brought another plate, smiling as though he had witnessed something special. Mateo laughed softly. "I always overestimate how hungry I am." Valeria smiled. "That's a fortunate mistake." For a few minutes, they talked about ordinary things. The snowfall, the music playing softly in the restaurant, their favorite holiday meals. There was no awkwardness, only an easy conversation between two strangers sharing a table. Eventually Mateo asked, "Do you have family nearby?" Valeria looked down at her glass. "My parents passed away several years ago. I'm sorry. I buried myself in work after that." He nodded quietly. "I know how that feels." He explained that he had inherited a small repair shop after his father became ill. He had dreamed of becoming an engineer but gave up college to keep the family business alive. Years passed before he realized those dreams had quietly disappeared. "Do you regret it?" Valeria asked. "Sometimes." He smiled. "But helping people has its own rewards." "What about your family?" "My wife passed away 8 years ago." "I'm so sorry. I still miss her every day." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence shared by two people who understood loss without needing long explanations. Valeria noticed something unusual. Mateo hadn't asked what she did for a living. You haven't asked about my job. He shrugged. I figured if you wanted to tell me, you would. She laughed. Most people ask within 30 seconds. I'm more interested in who I'm eating with than what title is printed on a business card. Those words stayed with her. She couldn't remember the last time someone cared more about her thoughts than her position. They continued talking for nearly 2 hours. They shared childhood memories, favorite books, embarrassing mistakes, and lessons learned through hardship. Matteo told funny stories about customers who tried fixing their own cars before bringing them to his garage. Valeria laughed harder than she had in years. When midnight drew near, the restaurant manager walked through the dining room greeting guests. As he approached their table, he suddenly froze. His eyes widened. Miss Castillo. The room became unusually quiet. Several customers turned toward them. The manager looked horrified. I didn't recognize you. He apologized repeatedly. If we'd known who you were, we would have prepared our private dining room immediately. We could still move you now. Valeria gently shook her head. No, thank you, but you're our honored guest. She smiled warmly. I already have exactly what I came looking for. Everyone followed her gaze toward Matteo. The mechanic looked completely confused. You didn't tell me you were famous. She smiled. You never asked. A young woman at a nearby table whispered to her husband, she's one of the richest women in the country. Matteo stared at Valeria for a moment before laughing. Well, that explains why your watch probably costs more than my garage. She laughed too. And your kindness is worth more than my watch. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The entire restaurant joined together. 3, 2, 1. Cheers filled the room as fireworks exploded outside. People hugged family members and kissed loved ones. Matteo hesitated for a second before simply extending his hand. Happy New Year, Valeria. Instead of shaking it, she stepped forward and hugged him. The restaurant applauded. Many people smiled without fully understanding why such a simple moment felt so meaningful. Before leaving, Valeria asked, would you have coffee with me sometime? Matteo grinned. I suppose I can make time between oil changes. They exchanged phone numbers. Over the following weeks, they met often. Sometimes at small cafes. Sometimes during quiet walks in the park. Occasionally she visited his repair shop, pretending her perfectly maintained car needed another inspection. His employees quickly noticed. Boss, one joked, that luxury car has become our most loyal customer. Matteo smiled. I've noticed. Valeria admired how honestly he treated every customer. Whether someone drove an old pickup truck or a luxury sports car, he charged fair prices and explained every repair with patience. He never took advantage of anyone. One afternoon she asked, you've had opportunities to raise your prices. Why don't you? He answered simply, people trust me. He paused. I'd rather earn respect than extra dollars. Those words affected her deeply. She returned to her company determined to change things. She introduced employee assistance programs, increased wages for entry-level workers, expanded scholarships for employees' children, and began visiting every department personally instead of staying isolated in executive offices. Her employees noticed the difference immediately. One senior manager finally asked, what changed? She smiled. I met someone who reminded me what success is supposed to look like. Months later, she invited Matteo to speak at the company's annual leadership conference. Executives expected a famous entrepreneur. Instead, a humble mechanic walked onto the stage wearing his cleanest work shirt. Some people exchanged puzzled looks. Valeria introduced him with pride. The greatest lesson I learned this year didn't come from a business book. She looked toward Matteo. It came from a man who stood up so a stranger wouldn't have to stand alone. The audience listened carefully. Matteo spoke without notes. If you're lucky enough to have a seat while someone else is standing alone, make room. Kindness doesn't ask who deserves it. It simply acts. When he finished, the auditorium erupted into a standing ovation. Many executives admitted later that his speech moved them more than any motivational seminar they had ever attended. Exactly 1 year after they first met, New Year's Eve returned. This time they walked into the same restaurant together. The hostess greeted them with a smile. We've been saving your favorite table. The owner had placed a small brass plaque beside the corner table. It read, reserved for those who make room for others. Valeria touched the plaque gently. You inspired this. The owner smiled. No, you both did. As midnight approached once again, the restaurant filled with laughter. Valeria looked around the room. A year earlier she had believed she was searching for a place to eat dinner. Instead, she had found friendship, purpose, and a reminder that the richest moments in life are never purchased. When the countdown reached 0, fireworks illuminated the night sky once more. Mateo took her hand. Funny, isn't it? What is? If I hadn't stood up for one lonely stranger, I might still be spending New Year's Eve alone. Valeria smiled with grateful eyes. And if I hadn't accepted one simple invitation, I might still believe success meant owning the biggest table instead of sharing the smallest one. They stood together as snow quietly fell outside, surrounded by ordinary people celebrating an extraordinary evening. Because in the end, the greatest miracle of that New Year's Eve wasn't that a billionaire met a mechanic. It was that two lonely hearts discovered that true wealth is measured not by the size of a bank account, but by the willingness to make room for another person.